Welcome to Day Zero.
Welcome to Day Zero with FOUNDIT. Today I'm joined with good friend and the Domain Group Chief Commercial Officer of Domain, John Foong. Welcome.
Hey Gus, great to be here.
Mate, it's great to have you on the podcast to talk about your property investing, to talk about your career so far with some of the biggest brands and well-known businesses in Australia and over in the US as well.
Yeah.
And to talk about some of your insights and your personal journey from a career perspective. And also, I'm going to bounce a few ideas off you of what we're thinking about the business, because I always enjoy the way that you go about thinking about things and how you think about how to analyse a problem or an opportunity that I find is very different to a lot of people as well. So thanks for coming on.
Oh, great to be here.
So to kick things off, can you give us a little bit of background, the listeners a bit of background on your journey so far? Obviously, Chief Commercial Officer of Domain, which is one of the most well-known, well-trusted brands in Australia. But before that, being at Google as the head of sales globally. Talk us through that.
Yeah. So pretty much grew up in Sydney, up on the North Shore. My parents came from Malaysia and Hong Kong, and had a lovely childhood here. Went and studied technology, information systems and business at the UNSW. And pretty much after that, really decided when I was young that leadership was a passion of mine. Really had a desire to learn leadership from the best place in the world and take that leadership into business, into nonprofit, into family.
Yeah.
And with that, vision in mind, I went to management consulting. I worked for McKinsey for a few years. And one of the cool things they do at some of these consulting companies is they have you, after you've been there for 2 years as an analyst, they go, look, where would you like to study? Do something different for a few years. And one of the things that I was able to do was get into Stanford in Silicon Valley, the US, and do an MBA and master's education. And that just opened up the whole world to me. I lived in Australia, the same postcode my whole life. This showed me how Aussies can rule the world.
Yeah.
So that was back in the early 2000s. Joined a small company called Google back then. Worked out of Ireland, England, and the US, and ended up spending 13 years there in a variety of different roles: marketing, operations, and as you said, head of sales for cloud computing. It was pretty small at the beginning. This is selling Gmail and Maps and some of our cloud SaaS products.
Yeah.
But it became something giant. It's now tens of billions of dollars. And I eventually moved to Silicon Valley, the US, to headquarters, and had a chance to run a global team of partner sellers who go out there and basically find companies like Accenture and Deloitte who are trying to sell their own cloud computing services and use Google as a platform. So
it's interesting. I'll come back to the Google component in a moment and how you went to go to market with that you and I had heard conversations around before. But I think something that I learned from you that you value very highly is your network.
Yeah.
And the network that particularly that you built at Stanford that you still have today.
Yeah.
And the people that you still bounce off and have a call with weekly.
That's
with
right.
some really intelligent people out.
Yeah.
What was that learning curve like when you first got to Stanford and stepping out of, a very small market being Australia into a much bigger picture in terms of Stanford and some of the people that you've been able to come into walks of life with since then as well?
Yeah, it's interesting when I reflect upon some of these amazing places like Stanford and Google and McKinsey where you're kind of shoulder to shoulder with some amazing folks, people who've done amazing things. Some of my friends become billionaires, founded huge companies. And they're always like, we're all humans.
Yeah.
We're just like people who want to connect, who want to kind of shoot the breeze about things, who care about family, who want to stay fit, who want to go out and have a good time, And I think that was the really cool thing about Stanford. Stanford MBA it's in some ways it's a ticket to a new world. But really a lot of that is you just get into some amazing people who are going to do amazing things. And so for me, when I think about my Stanford experience, it really was about getting to connect with 400 people in my year who we became really good friends. A bunch of them became really, really good friends. And as you said, every Monday, we were recording on Wednesday, just 2 days ago, catching up with a bunch of friends. We catch up every week and just talk about family and work and opportunities and AI. And it's just a whole bunch of people wanting to do good things and wanting to connect. And that's the thing. I found the very same thing about the Australian real estate marketplace. You've got people who've created some great businesses, but in the end, they're just looking to connect and make a difference.
Exactly. And I think there's a good saying of you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with and making sure that you're tapping into different people. And I think more importantly, the right people that are good people and want not just to make money, but also leave a positive impact on the world as well.
Yeah.
Coming back to the Google component and something that I remember talking to you at length about is, it was a cloud services business that was quite small at the beginning, but now today it is a huge part of
business.
Google.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the different ways that you went to go to market with that. It wasn't just a straight BDM. There
right.
was ambassadors. There was different segments
right.
of way you go into market. Can you give the listeners a bit of an understanding of the different ways of which, from your learnings at Google, that you went to market helped build such a big business inside of there?
Yeah. And I think it's very relevant for our industry.
Yeah.
So going back to, this is in the 2000s, Gmail was launched in 2004. And Gmail was a revolutionary email product. People thought it was an April Fool's joke that you could have like a gigabyte of storage. And actually, it turned out to be something where people just loved to be able to get onto any browser anytime and check their mail and not have to delete mails. It was pretty revolutionary. And about 3 years into Gmail, I joined Google shortly after. About three years into Gmail, people said, hey, look, I really want to use Gmail for my work email. And Google said, like, sorry, you can't. It's a free product. And they said, look, no, I really want to use it. I'm a startup. I'm a big company, whatever it is. I really want to use it. And so we started a product called Google Apps for Your Domain. It was not a very easy to say name. We ended up changing the name to Google Workspace and G Suite sometime later.
Yeah.
But effectively what Google Apps was Gmail, but instead of being at gmail.com, it was at your company. So actually a pretty simple concept, but actually fundamentally meant that people could use Gmail for their work email. Companies of all shapes and sizes, including Domain, as we eventually began to use it together. And at that point in time, you're going to market, you've got an important choice to make. And that important choice to make is, who are my customers? Because once you figure out who your customers are, the next question you ask is, how does this customer like to buy stuff? So write down Gmail, who are my customers? Well, any business, but we found there's a lot of traction with small and medium businesses. And Google actually, we ended up having a strategy where we would give Gmail away to universities for them to use at University of New South Wales email. And that has proven to be a very fertile ground where a lot of people graduate, do a startup, and they want to use Gmail for their business.
Yeah.
So we were very, very targeted on small to medium businesses. We wanted a few really large businesses as a flagship, but it wasn't like single person shops. It was small to medium sized companies. And then once you figure out, you get very surgical at who your customer is. You then ask the question, how does that customer like to buy? And for them, most of those companies, they're not tech companies. They're maybe a florist or maybe a bunch of folks, selling car repairs or whatever it is. They don't have time to have their own IT shop. They don't necessarily have their own IT department. Typically how they buy is they buy through a reseller or they buy through an IT technician. Right? Somebody who says like, hey, look, I need 10 computers, I need laptops for all of them. We're going to need the email that works. We need maybe an online drive. We'll pay you some money, basically manage this for us. And so what became very clear in the early days of Gmail is that the way people would want to buy is not necessarily direct from Google. Maybe one-person shops would, like sign up for Gmail. But the way they wanted to buy was to actually go through a reseller, an IT technician, a partner. And so our go-to-market, which I later came to run globally, was very much about finding the partners and doing one of two things. Helping them understand how they can incorporate Gmail into their business. So when they originally go out selling Microsoft email, which was our big competitor at the time, how Gmail could be good returns for them, steady, and a good option for their customers to use. And the other thing was, okay, when we get a lead, when someone comes to our website and says, hey, I want to buy Gmail, how do we get a partner to get involved? And actually we effectively give the business to them. We sell the software, they sell the service, and everyone's happy. So early on, once we defined our customer and how they like to buy, we realized the best way to go to market was to use a partner ecosystem and to build that out.
In terms of I guess what we would refer to that as almost like channel partnerships.
That's right.
So channel partnerships or partnerships in general, whether you're a mortgage broker wanting to partner with buyer's agents, a seller agent wanting to partner with property managers, whatever it might be. What do you think the right ingredients need to be in order for it to be a fruitful and successful partnership? Because what we see a lot of in market is like, hey, we both like each other.
That's right.
Let's refer to each other and hopefully we both make a little bit of money along the way. That's generally how you see it happening in a very unsophisticated way in the market.
That's right.
What do you think are the right ingredients that come into a channel partnership?
The most important mindset to have in a channel partnership is you want to find people who you like, you got good culture, you got values fit, similar passions. But ultimately, assume brutal, selfish self-interest. Brutal, selfish self-interest. So in this case, let's take the Gmail example. We would like, maybe it's a big reseller like Accenture. Maybe it's a small single-person shop who just has a bunch of customers and is passionate about setting up IT systems. How do you make it a no-brainer for them to sell Gmail? What has to be true? So if I just break that down, right? The economics part is probably the biggest part.
Yeah.
So every time they install Gmail, what are you going to give them? The percentage cut and the absolute number of dollars is really, really important. But the other thing is you've got to de-risk it for them. You know, they've got to try and run their own business. They're not going to go out there and, you know, go door knocking and say, hey, please buy Gmail. So what we'd have to do is we do what's called lead passing. We would say, hey, if you come and get on board with us, we will give you 10 to 15 hot leads a week, right? And half of those will turn to money. That money will both come to us, but also to you and services. But then you also got to hold their hand. Like, they don't know anything about Gmail. They just know stuff about technology and email. So what we did is we had to build a certification program. We said, if you commit to being a partner, then we're going to train you up. We're going to send 5-year people to our university, give them accreditation, make sure there's a special line they can call when they need help. So you basically got to put all the ingredients together. So when a business person who is making a purely self-interested decision, why should they sell Google and not Microsoft? That was basically what we're trying to do. And the challenge is, at the same time, you've got to make it selfish for you, right? You've got to go, well, you know, yeah, I could just sell it directly to a customer. Why would I give 30% of my margin and all this extra cost and a partner account manager to help them? You've got to do the maths and say, well, if we want to change the world, if we want to 10 times our business, we're not going to hire 1,000 salespeople. We're going to hire a few partner managers and try and get 1,000 partners.
It's an interesting segue into a question I want to ask you around where we're at as a business and what we're building, which is effectively a marketplace in a lot of cases. So you've got, what's the problem in the customer segments that we care about, to your point? Start there first. So what does the mortgage broker care about? They care about increasing their conversion rate. My average conversion rate in Australia is 30%. 70% of people getting a pre-approval actually don't end up buying.
Don't use it.
Yeah. The second one is a seller agent. What's a seller agent's problem at the moment? A seller agent's problem is, how do they sell more properties, less days on market, and have the highest sale price? Is inevitably. The next one is the buyer. How do you give the buyer a better chance of success? And the last one is the buyer agent. How do you help buyer agents to grow their business and in return grow the whole marketplace as well? So our belief is that, 20 years ago, when you bought a property for $100,000 and you could repay that mortgage in 7.5 years, it was okay to buy on a few comparable sales. Fast forward to today, people are still buying on a handful of comparable sales. They get a bit more data out of domain, but generally they're doing it alone. And so our philosophy is that same transaction that 20 years ago was worth $100,000 and a 6.5-year repayment plan is now a 25 to 30-year mortgage commitment or payback plan, and it's a multi-million-dollar decision.
Totally.
Yet the stakes are way infinitely higher, yet the process is very, very similar as to how they actually go about it. And so this struggle, or the opportunity of what we're trying to do, is because it's a marketplace strategy, selfishly, to your point, eventually you want to monetize the whole marketplace. Where at which point you monetize who in the category comes first is what we've been working through. So right now it's like distilling down, okay, who is the most important customer to us right now versus who is the most important customer to us longer term? The answer we've been kind of arrived at is, right now what we care about mostly is we want to back really great buyers agents. If you get buyers agents in, you got to have more people that help more buyers by extension and help with a loose partnership with some mortgage brokers, which you can sophisticate and enterprise up later. The problem is, as you all know, is in Australia or in kind of any marketplace, you've got supply and demand. Now, if you have demand being a buyer agent, and you don't have any supply being listings, you got nowhere to put demand. What do you think, or how do you think we should be breaking down and thinking about that problem to put you on the spot?
Sure. The way I think about an ecosystem is the following. Number one, who has to win for FOUNDIT to get adoption? Right? Who has to go, wow, as a result of FOUNDIT, things are much better. And I think you've correctly identified that actually the buyer's agent is probably the critical piece, because most of those other folks are probably happy enough to keep dealing with buyer's agents. They'll keep using them. But if the buyer's agent goes, wow, FOUNDIT makes things in my life a lot better, then actually you will get traction. And so then once you've identified as you have the most important stakeholder, you then apply that question, which I talked about with the Gmail partner strategy. How do I make becoming a FOUNDIT member, partner, an absolute no-brainer for a great partner, for a great buyer's agent? And so for me, that's the question around, okay, a good buyer's agent, maybe doing $500,000 of revenue per year. You're doing fine. You've got a system, you've got a client base, you've got a referral base. What difference does FOUNDIT make to me? What difference does it make? You have to make such a difference where they go, wow, I am going to win so much more and earn so much more and be so much more successful with less work if I come on board, even though I'm already very successful. And then it is important to think about the other players in the marketplace, the buyer, the seller, the financier, things like that. But for them, it doesn't have to be such a big win. Ideally, you'd want a selling agent to go, oh, wow, I really want to sell to a founder buyer's agent because things are so much better, the transaction's easier. As long as you're not disadvantaging that partner, that particular player in the ecosystem, you're probably fine as long as the buyer's agent is absolutely, just wants to go all in with FOUNDIT. But it'd be nice if everyone in the ecosystem go, yeah, I'm going to deal with FOUNDIT folks as much as I can. That just reduces the friction in trying to get adoption.
Yeah, I think it's been an interesting journey from that perspective of the buyer agent is the most important customer to us. By extension, their most important customer is the buyer. So how do you help them to help serve the buyer by helping them scale and succeed their business? Inevitably comes back to very similar to the real-time agent concept, which is whatever is non-dollar productive, remove from their day. Salespeople, they want to be out and they make money on dollar productive items. What does that look like? Anytime you're having an interaction with a human being, whether you're in market inspecting a property, you're building relationships with pipeline, or you're managing existing clients and working with sell-side agents to bring deals together, anything outside of that, which is like 80% of their actual day, that's got to be our job to be obsessed with removing that stuff out of their day for them to help them scale and succeed their businesses. I think that what is an interesting one, and I know that you've done this very, very well, is obviously going from running a P&L in your career of $1 million to now hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
What's been the learning curve from you and how there's a book you've given to us many a time, which is What Got You Here Won't Get You There, and how you evolved over time to change the way that you thought and how you behaved, both as a leader, but also as you were thinking about how do you have an impact on a P&L that's hundreds of millions versus $1 million as well.
Yeah, and this is a big thing in Silicon Valley where you're going from being, maybe a single sole founder, to being a startup, to being a scale-up, to being a relatively large company. And what you typically find in Silicon Valley is that often the same founder doesn't make it all the way because a different set of skills is required.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think for me, when you're in the startup world, you're across everything, like you were in the early days of Real-Time Agent and Bid Tracker. And a lot of your success there is about being in the details.
Yeah.
About being in the details. And that's exciting. And that takes a certain kind of leadership and application. And it means that you effectively know everyone, you know everything, and you still need people to help who are engaged, but you can play a different role.
Yeah.
And then being a scale-up is about the systems. It's about saying, okay, I can't be across the 40 people I have in the company, what they're doing. How do we have the right systems so we can scale marketing, scale sales, scale product and tech? A lot of that there to me is about having the right leadership underneath you who then can run a great 5-person marketing team or whatever it is. So I think the difference between startup and scale-up is recruiting and systems. Recruiting is about getting the right managers in place. Scale-up is about trying to get a tapestry, a hierarchy that all works together where you're keeping everyone moving at the same goal, that everyone's focused on the same thing.
You talk about that from a founder's perspective, and we've seen that all the time of like a business or a founder that can get it to like $5 million purely on relationship and hustle and grit, and then they tap out because there's not enough hours in the day, and they need to systemize and create process to remove them. Because ultimately they become the bottleneck and the problem that exists within the business, whether they've got enough self-awareness or not to see that sometimes is what holds them back. But in terms of hiring from a leadership perspective, do you look at the view of, do you hire for now or do you hire for where you think you need to be in 2 years from now? And what I mean by that is, let's take like a head of marketing role, for example. Do you hire for someone who has high capability that you know that can grow into the role, or do you hire for what you know you need right now for the next 12 months?
The answer is both, is the challenging question. I'd say the following when I think about hiring, a few hiring principles. Number one, you want to create a culture and a system where you're hiring people who are better than you. And to me, if I think about my own career, probably one of the marks of my success is my ability to attract and retain people who, on paper, maybe have more experience than me, who have done great things, but see enough growth opportunity or see enough advantage in working with me that they say, actually, this is rationally, selfishly, the best next step for my career. There's a saying that A players hire A players and B players hire C players. And so those hires are so important, particularly when you're in scale-up mode, when things are changing. You don't get that right, then pretty much everything else is going to have diminishing marginal returns. So I think in coming back to your question, do you hire for the future or for now? It really depends on how fast the company is growing, right? If the company is growing rapidly, you're doubling every year or something like that, then actually you can sell the growth story. And ideally what you're looking for is someone who has experience in managing where the company is in 2 years from now, but is happy to take a step back because they know in 2 years they'll be where they are now, and in 4 years they'll be twice as far, right? And so that is a different growth trajectory. But if your growth trajectory is like single digits, low double digits revenue, the company is, growing a little, 3 or 4, 5, 10%, then I think you want to be hiring someone who can do the job now, who's content to do the job now for a while, but ultimately has a desire to grow, and whose appearance, whose involvement will accelerate the company's growth. If you overhire in that regard, number one, you'll have to pay for it financially. And then secondly, you'll get someone very frustrated.
In terms of like shifting the focus to real estate agents and how this would relate to them, there's a lot of really good businesses that you and I get to deal with that are they make tens of millions of dollars a year, but the reality of a real estate business in a lot of cases, to your point around leadership, is that often to hire and then keep really good talent, I think you used to talk to me about all the time, which is called extending the wedge. How do you continue to keep them on the learning curve where they don't feel like that they're not learning anything anymore? What are some of the ways of where you do it, where you give us an example of extending the wedge and how you've seen it within your own business that you're running of like, I know that person's kind of reaching the end of that learning curve. What am I going to do to expand their horizon again?
Yeah. No, and this is a concept, Gus, that you and me talked about runway, right? Where you want to make the runway as long as possible before they run out of runway and feel, geez, I got to get out of here. I'm not learning anything. To me, the most important thing is to understand what the person who's working for you values, right? And roughly breaks down to one of three things for me. There's kind of, let me call them traditional values like money, work-life balance. There's relationships, which is the quality of the team, the quality of you, and how much they're learning. And then there's drive, like are they making a difference? They're having an impact. What's their purpose? And different people value different things at different points in their career. I mean, I remember back early on, one of the things that attracted me to working for McKinsey or Google is this career accelerator, this rocket ship. And then as I got married and had kids, actually financial stability. So kind of like that level of finance and how much those finances could grow if the company was successful. Yep. And now in this stage, with a young family and looking to make a big difference, that thing of how much of impact I can make on society, on an industry is really important to me.
Yeah.
And everyone's different, even at the same stage of their life. Everyone can be different from the next person. So the trick and extent of the runway has all got to do with understanding the person who you want to retain on this team. And then saying to yourself, okay, with the levers I have in this business, what can I do to extend that runway? So, for example, a lot of real estate agents, the problem is they're a great agent, you want to keep them, but financially, they're being offered better money to go elsewhere. That's when you might introduce things such as equity. We go, hey, look, you grow with the business will grow with you, right? Someone who's, a bit earlier in their career and just looking to learn, you might say, hey, look, I'm going to mentor you. I'm going to mentor you, or you're going to be mentored by this person. Even if you can earn more money elsewhere, you are not going to get as good learning opportunity because I'm going to push you, I'm going to stretch you and things like that. So it's all about understanding, like even with yourself, Gus, like, you had grown from being in a startup and, Jason came on board and said, hey, come be part of a corporation. I came on and said, hey, don't be part of running a division, run a whole segment, work and help run the whole residential business and every solution that we have, not just the solutions you built. And that matched your level of ambition of like, hey, don't just work on cool stuff, but want to learn how to grow, hundreds of people. And that was what you wanted at that point then.
100%.
And then you knew that actually you could try and find it elsewhere, but it's a place that ticks other boxes around, finance okay, culture's okay, people are good, but actually this learning opportunity, I can't get anywhere else. This is the right place where I ended up staying for 6-7 years.
100%. And I think a learning that I wouldn't mind you just explaining to some people that we see a lot of business leaders and a lot of business owners that watch revenue from a metric perspective to understand what good looks like. How are they performing at the moment? Is the business going well? Are we making a profit or are we not? I think one of the big things that you taught me was what are the leading indicators from revenue. Revenue at a point is almost too late.
Yeah.
It's like, it's too late. It's telling you what the scorecard is. What are the things that are giving the indications up front as to whether you're actually going to be heading in the right direction? What are some of the things you had to do when you came into Domain to set it up and looking at like, okay, what are the indicators inside of this business as well?
Yeah, I think
and how do you think about it in generally?
To me, whether you're talking about work or family, it's all very, very similar. You start with the end in mind. As Jim Collins says in Good to Great, what are you building towards? What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to build this big company? You're trying to make lots of money? You're trying to get a great experience? And for the company, I tend to pick a waypoint. And that waypoint is, what would greatness look in 5 years' time? And you try and get as surgical and as detailed as you can, knowing it's 5 years away, and it definitely won't work out exactly the way you think.
Yep.
But what is it? Is it, we want to be changing Australia? Is it actually, no, we just want to build a good little business? We want to take over a niche? Like the more surgical you can be, the more precise and the more helpful you can do everything else. So I tend to pick a point 5 years in the future. Great. What does greatness look like? And then you take it back to, okay, and that's what 5 years looks like. What would a great year this year look like in 1 year? Where would we need to be? And again, you try and be as descriptive as possible. So revenue is definitely a good measure, but cost, profit is important. Maybe it's the size of business. Certainly the quality and the retention of your people. Maybe it's an engagement survey that you care about, a product roadmap. So you try and think of all the things, and that's going to force you also to prioritize. Like, oh wow, we want like 50 things.
Yeah.
What are the 5 or 6 must-haves that we absolutely must achieve this year in order to give us the best chance of hitting that 5-year vision, that long-term vision of the company? I've found that if you have a multidisciplinary sense of what those 5 or 6 goals are, those objective and key results, OKRs, as we call them at Google, those are great ways to kind of keep track of how you're doing. And we traffic light them every month, red, yellow, green. If we know that if that balanced scorecard is doing well, then we're probably on track.
Yep.
And we know if something's off, then we look for that leading indicator, which maybe isn't just revenue, maybe it's leads, maybe it's meetings, maybe it's pipeline. But you think about what are the indicators that are going to give you the best sense that of these 5 or 6 goals, which ones are ahead or behind target ahead of time.
I think something that, coming back to one of the points you were making before, for you personally, it's not just about money, it's about having an impact on society and from a cultural perspective as well, in the industry you're working at and in the community that you live in as well. I think, do you want to talk a little bit about the rise and how you've been involved in that to help shape the industry in a more positive light and positive direction as well?
Yeah, I mean, one of the cool things about being at Domain and CoStar is, because of the size of it, and because of the culture of our company, we have a passion to really make the industry better, make it more trusted. We know that in our industry, there's a very high rate of mental health and anxiety challenges, that even suicides are 2 to 3 times that of the normal population. So we feel we can make a pretty big difference. And something that both of us have been involved with is the RISE initiative, which is, it's a board of folks from across the industry. But the whole idea is how to help people, think, feel, and perform better. So it's about mental health, but it's ultimately also about performance as well. And we think that, particularly given it's across many companies and it's across the whole industry, the presence of this nonprofit is important just to raise awareness that, hey, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to care about your mental health. It's okay to not just focus on dollars. In fact, you should focus on some of these things because that's ultimately your longevity.
Yeah.
And then to organize, whether it's leadership offsites, whether it's the app that we have that's been downloaded 10,000 times, whether it's just forums, online or in person, people meet up. These are all ways where we're all helping work on our mental health and really raise awareness that mental health is tough in real estate. So that's something where I'm grateful to work for a company that really values changing our industry. And it's been nice to be part of both Domain and CoStar and then also on the board of RISE as well.
Yeah, it's been a great initiative to be a part of, and there's some really interesting impacts that have been happened in the industry. I think, think about it, like 10,000 downloads on an app. A lot of apps don't even get that and of any startup. I think moving to the last category I wanted to talk to you about is you're an avid property investor as well, both here and in the US as well. Yeah. I remember you've showed me a photo of your first apartment you bought in Sydney University. I don't think you own that one anymore.
Wish I did, but don't own it.
It was a studio, right?
Studio apartment, late 90s.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your philosophy around how you invest in property, what you've done around both in the US and then obviously starting to invest back into the Australian market as well? I think you've invested nearly in every state, right?
Yeah,
in Australia.
Every state, So a few key principles. I think the first one that, we'd say a lot of Domain is don't try and time the market. maximize time in the market. And for me, I was very, very fortunate. My dad was a real estate agent. My granny, she grew up in Southeast Asia. Property was their kind of, family business, if you will. So even growing up, my dad would talk about his investment properties even before he became a real estate investor. And as soon as I turned 18, I got a scholarship to uni and was able to use that, as part of a mortgage. I went and bought something. Took my life savings, bought that apartment because we're trying to maximize time in the market, not trying to time the market. And that has served me extremely well. I mean, that's not just true of property investing. That's true of, pretty much most shares.
Yeah.
You get in early, it's a good company. You come back 20 years later, you're a millionaire. And for me, that's probably the most important thing. The second principle of property for me is about the smart use of leverage. I think one of the things that differentiates property from shares is that you can borrow against it.
Yeah.
Particularly commercial, but also in residential. And to me, if you take the historical long-term average of 6 to 7%, growth in home values over the past 50, 100 years, if you're doing a 25% down payment, and if the rent you get from that or the value you get from that is able to offset the interest you're paying on the 75% loan you have, you're not just making 6 or 7% per year, you're making 4 times that, 20 to 25% per year. And when I think about my own investing journey, which began in Sydney and then went to Perth and Cairns and things like that, it's been a lot of luck, but a luck that's come from time in the market and the smart use of leverage, where you're getting properties that are ideally not too cash flow negative, ideally cash flow positive. You're borrowing 75%. These things are paying for themselves. You're accumulating. One thing which I don't do a lot of, but have done a little, is where you're trying to find smart ways to transform the value of that. So you renovate the home, or maybe you can split into a duplex or semi-detached or something like that, and then you've created another property, another income stream, another asset to sell.
Yeah.
So for me, it hasn't been particularly complicated. It's just been get in the market early. As soon as I got my degree, got a job, I got another property. As soon as that property had gone up in 50, 100% of value, we sold it, buy another property, or refinance, buy another property. As soon as I did my MBA, which was very expensive, but then graduated, sold another property, bought another property, I should say. So every time I'm getting promotion or cash, trying to keep our expenses low. I was not particularly sophisticated, 20-something, didn't have very expensive habits, put that money to work. And, 20 years later, kind of living off the proceeds of just investments made 25 years ago.
It's one of my old mentors used to say to me, he's a real estate agent, owns a lot of property as well, is always sell everyone else's property and never sell your own. And time in market, exactly to your point, you forget about it, buy it and forget about it, and then come back to it in 10 years' time as well.
And that to me is why I'm so passionate about buyer's agents. I've used buyer's agents for my last, I think 6 or 7 properties, both here and abroad. I do think that if you buy the right asset, then the best time frame is forever. Because that thing will just, because you pick the right demographic, the right build, whatever it is, it's just going to keep increasing value over time. Places where people want to live, like Sydney, like San Francisco, it's only getting harder and harder to build. So generally, a great buyer's agent makes all the difference. And conversely, a bad buyer's agent or not using a buyer's agent can actually mean that whole philosophy I just talked about falls apart. Because then you've actually bought the wrong thing and then you're up the creek.
Exactly to your point around San Francisco and some of the major cities, whether it's in Australia, is buy land because they can't make any more of it as well.
Yeah.
Well, John, thank you for such an insightful conversation and for everything you do for the real estate industry. It's a pleasure having you on.
Great. Gus and team, so excited to see your venture, and thanks for having me on. Look forward to coming back.